Story 1. Check in with Reddit to see what everyone else is doing, find the most upvoted post, and do that. Story 2. Back in the day, we were all told we would be safe if we ducked under our desks. I guess I will need a bigger desk. Story 3. I am poor, disabled, and within the blast radius of a military installation. My best option at this point is reincarnation. Story 4. Just consider that no one actually knows what World War III is, other than assuming the 1980s version of nuclear holocaust. Story 5. I am a baby boomer. My training for this runs deep all the way back to drills in elementary school. I will go into a sturdily constructed room, put my head between my knees, and prepare for the worst. Story 6. If World War III breaks out tomorrow, I am raiding Costco, befriending my prepper neighbor with chickens, searching how to survive nuclear fallout while panicking, and accepting that my best post-apocalypse skill is trading bad jokes for clean water. Story 7. Stay at home? I am in the Okanagan-Similkameen area. Everyone here thinks it is going to be like Fallout. Hate to break it to you, but massive nuclear fallout has not been a problem since the advent of the hydrogen bomb. If you can withstand the initial and secondary blast and heat issues, you can essentially ride it out. Bonus points if you live in the middle of nowhere. Now, as for geopolitical and military fighting, I do not know about you Generation Z kids, but I am 42 and too old to fight. Happy trails with that emergency draft. Story 8. I have a decent prepper stash, lots of guns and ammunition and water sources. Realistically, I will die on day 1 from a lack of cardiovascular fitness. Story 9. I am about 20% sure that World War III has already started. If you look closely at what caused World War II, it was not just the assassination of an archduke. If there are any historians in the future, they will likely include Ukraine, Gaza, and Donald Trump in the chapter about the events that led to it. Story 10. Grab a deck chair, as much alcohol, drugs, and junk food as I can handle, and watch the fireworks. I am not surviving if it is in my neighborhood. Story 11. Depends on what you are talking about with regard to World War III. Convencional va? The United States is fairly safe from being targeted by conventional munitions thanks to 2 oceans and the most powerful Air Force and Navy in history. If nuclear, it depends on total versus partial nuclear war and a predictable versus bolt-out-of-the-blue attack. Largely, the Federal Emergency Management Agency and other federal emergency planning groups are in place to provide rapid response and aid to impacted areas in the event of partial attacks. In a lead-up to a predictable attack, move to areas away from expected attack vectors, using some planning materials such as the Federal Emergency Management Agency's National Airborne Advisory Plan 90 documentation. In the event of a sudden, total nuclear war, it is a everyone flies situation, and we are all in serious trouble no matter how prepared we are. Hope you know how to farm and rebuild communities and communication systems instead of just hoarding guns and ammunition. Story 12. Find an intelligent mechanic who can repair the majority of important devices such as cars or basic electrical equipment. Story 13. It depends on the side my country chooses. If we choose our traditional allies, I will step up in my community to ease the burden of many people being called to duty. If we choose the opposing side, then I will do what I can to undermine the war effort while taking personal defense very seriously in light of the expected domestic political violence and abuses. Story 14. I own about 40 acres of land in an area that is sparsely populated, and at least 60% of people within a mile are Amish. I am definitely leaving my home in the suburbs, taking my children to the farm, and living the rest of our days working hard, having fun, and loving one another to the fullest until our time comes. I have a good relationship with the Amish community there, and there is no group I would rather endure a nuclear apocalypse with. Story 15. None. If there is a nuclear exchange beyond a certain number of kilotons, we are all dead, just some faster than others. Story 16. I have a bunch of unused, heavy-duty, extra-large garbage bags left over from the year 2000, so I am going to Best Buy. Story 17. Probably dying. I guess the best I can hope for is that it does not escalate. I will go live in the mountains camping, coming down for groceries or something. I live in Arizona, so as long as I get out of the valley, I am probably fine. Too bad for me, I am not some rich person with a bunker. So yeah, probably dying. What a time we live in. Story 18. Carry on as normal. I live in a remote part of an African country, and we have nothing others want, so we will be okay. Story 19. I am a reservist. When that happens and we are involved, I have no strategy besides following orders. Story 20. Post-World War III might not be a world worth trying to survive in. I will try my hardest for as long as I can, but once it becomes clear that there is no future, I will never have a good day again. My life will be continuous stress, pain, loss, starvation, and sickness. I will use whatever cannabis I have left and then take the easy way out. Story 21. I live near the gateway to Europe, Rotterdam Harbor, and an airfield where defense is located. I will walk outside, get my chair, drink something nice, and rest. Story 22. Take advantage of the immediate interest rate drops and refinance my house. That will help. If it does not, that means they got me. Story 23. Honestly, I am not a drug user, but I would stock a car with beer, snacks, and cannabis and drive far out to the remote countryside. I would follow the news for as long as there are broadcasts. Story 24. I live very close to a United States Army munitions depot. In the event of World War III, a thermonuclear detonation would end all my problems quickly. Story 25. I am less than 100 miles from where 1/3 of the nuclear submarines in the United States Navy are based. My plan is to look up and say, "Oh, pretty light," but I doubt I will even have time to say that. Story 26. There is no survival strategy if something goes nuclear. You would wish you were dead rather than trying to survive in the aftermath. It is honestly a miserable experience because most of the populated areas will be scorched barren. Anywhere that is not scorched will be covered in radiation through the weather. But I will probably definitely be drinking and checking Reddit until 7 p.m. Story 27. I live in a smaller town that is not near any location I think would be targeted. I would probably survive the initial bombings and missiles. However, I would gradually die from the eventual radioactive fallout because I have no place to go to escape it. Story 28. In-laws have a place far out in the middle of nowhere, stocked for doomsday. They will both last about a month before their medications are used up. Then it will be mine. Story 29. I will hold my cats and apologize that humans are very foolish. I hope we are affected by the first wave. Story 30. We have an obligation to defend our country, no matter who you are. Given my education, I would most likely be assigned to keep schools running. That would also be my reason to survive. I also live near the capital and close to some important infrastructure, so I might be one of the first ones to go, which, if you think about it, might not be too bad. There is no way I am fast enough to run. Story 31. Stay in bed and never get up. If I am sleeping, they think I am dead. If there is no they, then I am sleeping. Story 32. If childhood has taught me anything, it is that hiding under the covers makes you invincible to anything and everything, so I would do that. Story 33. I live about 5 miles away from one of the 2 military air bases in the Netherlands. If bombs go flying, I just get a second sunrise that day, and that will be it. Story 34. Well, I am from Germany. I would not have time to think about a survival strategy because I would sit there and think, this time it is not my country that started this. I never knew I would be able to witness this. Story 35. Suicide. What, do you think I am going to save my country from nuclear annihilation? Hearing the ant people's story from Japan, I am not going to want to experience that. Story 36. Try to get to my daughter's house, so I can spend my last few minutes with her and my grandchildren. If not, hold someone's hand and give each other some comfort until the end. Story 37. Everyone laughed at me for being prepared. Then the president took office and now everyone wants to be friends. I know who I will eat when the tuna runs out. Story 38. Thankfully, I will not need a survival plan. I live within blast range of one of the busiest Royal Australian Air Force bases in the country. It will be a priority target, meaning I will likely be among the early casualties. Story 39. Wear a banana costume. Military forces, militia groups, and desperate mobs all look for utility. I want to appear functionally irrelevant. No one cares about the person in the banana costume. They are obviously insane and statistically useless. In war, the insane and statistically useless often outlive everyone. Story 40. Interesting to assume we are not already in the middle of World War III. We have trade wars left and right, cyber warfare, information warfare, a couple of major genocides happening, shooting battles between nuclear powers, big countries invading smaller countries for conquest, proxy wars, civil wars, fascist takeovers, and propaganda from everybody confusing the whole thing. World War II is not possible anymore due to technology, primarily nuclear weapons, and diplomatic advances through the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the European Union, but looking at the sheer amount of conflict and death happening globally, we are not doing a lot better. Obviously, things can escalate further if the United States decides to invade Greenland or Canada, or if Russia attacks the Baltics or China attacks Taiwan, but World War II also started small and then built up over time. Story 41. The survivors of World War III will be few and will have developed a taste for rats and bugs. My plan is to find a well-endowed woman, drive to the closest liquor store to get refreshments, then drive to the nearest military base and party like there is no tomorrow while waiting for the flash. Surviving nuclear winter is not on my list of things to do. We do not know how World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Sleep tight. Story 42. Lay low in a rural area, avoid major cities, stock essentials, stay off the grid, and only trust close people. I think. Story 43. I do not know that I would call it a survival strategy. I would find the nearest large city and wait. The United States is enough of a mess right now. I cannot imagine it becoming less ugly when things go wrong, especially when there is a significant portion of the population who would sooner harm their neighbor than help them. Story 44. I would associate myself with the largest group, as they will likely be the only people not starving when all 9 billion humans pluck the earth clean of food within a couple of weeks. Without mechanized farming, humans will destroy everything while searching for food. Hunting deer will be impossible. Every animal larger than a cat will be dead within a month. By the end of the second month, every leaf will be stripped from every tree, and every inch of leather will be boiled and chewed away. Unless you are very good at hiding, you must be skilled at killing, stealing, and being a ruthless apex predator if you want to survive. Story 45. Unlike the idiots here, I live in an area safe from nuclear blast and fallout. I have a year's supply of food and water that can be stretched longer with proper rationing. I will do my best to network with my local community to survive, as humans have done throughout history, until government can be reestablished. It will not be easy, and I am not guaranteed survival, but it is better than engaging in rampant hedonism before the explosion. Story 46. Where is the conflict occurring? I might do nothing if I am not being attacked. I will probably just read updates on Reddit and engage in online discussions. Story 47. I am sure I will be one of the first to go. I do not have any supplies, live in a fairly populated area, and do not have good survival skills. Story 48. I am heading into the mountains with my firearms and fishing poles. I am finding a state park with a reasonably clean water supply and building a cabin on a back hillside. Story 49. No survival. I am between Niagara Falls, Ontario, and Hamilton, Ontario. Power and steel production are primary targets. Die quickly with my loved ones. Story 50. If it goes nuclear, I am stocking up on my life supply of beer and helping out people in any way I can. Beer for me, labor and help for those around me. Story 51. Honestly, as a male of fighting age, I will probably go to war. Hopefully, it will be over before my children reach fighting age. Story 52. I have a decent network of friends with properties in Oregon, Washington, and Idaho who are good people. They are trustworthy, skilled, and well-prepared. I assume we would work together to secure horses and other resources and try to live off the land. I see no reason to engage in battle against what I assume are multiple large armies with advanced weaponry. I do not believe the geographic location I mentioned would be of high strategic importance, so I assume we could live decent lives. Story 53. Nuclear? Steal a bottle of Jack from my job, sit on the hood of my car, and call everyone. Conventional, go to work in uniform and stay in college to join the Air Force as an officer to fly. Story 54. Would it depend on how and where it breaks out? While we are on the topic, may I suggest watching Failsafe and then Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, both from the 1960s. Forget that they are in black and white and just watch them if you are interested in the subject matter. Last but not least, there is a movie from the 1980s called Threads. Then tell me how or even if you would want to survive as a regular person. Story 55. Thank God for a good life, call my loved ones I cannot personally see, and pray with them if they want to, then help others where I can. Love one another in the meantime. Story 56. If you mean nuclear war, life will not be worth living. Read The Road by Cormac McCarthy to understand the experience. Story 57. Treat it like an earthquake, wildfire, or any other natural disaster common in Southern California. Story 58. Stay unseen and tucked away in an unknown location. There are plenty of warehouses, both big and small, in my area, so maybe that will keep me safe. For food and resources, I am robbing wealthy people, then returning to my hiding place. Story 59. If someone starts dropping nuclear weapons, I guess I die. If it is just a big conventional war, I guess I apply for a job making weapons. I hope it ends before they draft overweight 41-year-olds or my 8-year-old. Story 60. Help my country where I can. I am a single adult, so I believe I could be useful somewhere with my previous training. I am not military, but I have security and firearm training. Story 61. I am actually looking forward to the Mad Max times. There will be less traffic. I can put a cowcatcher and a turret on my truck. Left lane, watch out. Story 62. I would go live with my parents. They basically live in the middle of nowhere and have a Kangal as a guard dog. Story 63. Not too bad before the war. Do you really want to increase the difficulty settings from very hard to insane? Story 64. If there are no nuclear weapons involved, probably nothing will happen as my country is isolated from most conflicts. However, due to our poor relationship with a neighboring country, it is advisable to stock up on canned goods and stay near a water supply. Story 65. I just mind my own business. But if any soldiers from either side were to start an altercation with me, well, cracks knuckles. I guess I'd have to have a little fun. Story 66. It depends. It might be beneficial to stay put. If we have to leave, I am at the base of the Sierra Nevada. So I guess head for the hills. Story 67. Find where the local mosquitoes are gathering. Make sure they feed on me until I am pale. Once the invaders take over, they will get all sorts of diseases. Eventually, we will win. Story 68. Be on the front lines in deactivating drones, directed energy weapons, and military robots. I have already consulted artificial intelligence. I planned ahead. Story 69. For all we know, future historians will include our time as part of World War III. They might say it started when Russia invaded Ukraine, for example. Story 70. I have the luxury of learning from my grandparents how to live off the land. I know of an area deep in the woods with a cave large enough to have a 2-story home and a greenhouse. I have all of Wikipedia and an offline artificial intelligence on a USB stick. Solar power and battery storage will be the hardest part to obtain, but setup is not difficult. Avoiding other people is imperative, so it will not be hard for me to keep away. Story 71. Kill drone swarms, directed energy weapons, and military robots. We need to figure out how to block satellite signals to deactivate those weapons. Story 72. I live within the blast radius of a definite first strike target, and I am perfectly satisfied with that. Story 73. Grandpa's farm in rural Georgia. I know the lay of the land and how to survive out there for extended periods of time. It is far enough away from major blast zones and has a natural water source nearby. There are generations of livestock. Story 74. I am in a large metropolitan city that will certainly be very high on the target list for incoming nuclear weapons. My plan is to try to call or text the handful of people I care about and hope I have enough time to make a great cup of coffee, go to the roof, and wait for the fireworks. Story 75. I do not really live by anything. Nothing will happen here. If it does, it will take a while to get here. I will come up with a plan by then. Story 76. In theory, I am moving. I live 2 kilometers from a nuclear military port. In practice, I ignore the problem and call my father in the hope that he can solve all my problems. Story 77. Tell my crush I like her. If everything goes well, I will spend the last moments devoted to making hers the best ever, since we all know World War III is going to be nuclear. If it does not go well, I will thank her for making my life enjoyable before probably just continuing with my life knowing I tried my best, and that is all that matters. Story 78. Realistically, I am not too concerned about bombs. I am in the middle of the United States. Nuclear weapons are not reaching us here. However, they will be shot down in the air, and I am sure it will cause radiation poisoning as it spreads into the atmosphere. I guess just stock up on toilet paper and hang tight like I did with coronavirus disease. Story 79. It depends on whether it starts out with maximum allowable deflection or just slowly ramps up. If it is a slow ramp up, I am going to work like always. If maximum allowable deflection happens, then we are all in serious trouble. Story 80. I live near a large city that would almost certainly be a major nuclear target. What I would do is drive toward the city as fast as I can as soon as the air raid siren starts. I would have no time to escape. It is better to be incinerated instantly in the blast than killed in the rubble and fallout. Story 81. Throw some gold and documents into a bag. Drive the family to the boat and sail away. If I can sail out, I might have a 10% chance of survival for a week. Story 82. New Zealand has been preparing for this for years by leaving maps for ourselves, hoping it will just blow over. Story 83. Run toward the large mushroom cloud. I am not built for a dystopian apocalypse. I do not want to survive if I cannot shower. Story 84. Get intoxicated for the first time just to see what it feels like. Then wait it out. Even if I survived the war, life would be difficult, so I would continue doing what I normally do until it is over for me. Story 85. I am in Canada. I am fine. Canada is not big enough to be targeted by a nuclear attack, and it is too cold to occupy. We adhere to the Geneva Conventions as a guideline. If the world values its people, they will leave Canada alone, or they will regret it. Story 86. Well, I am next to a bunch of targets like most people in the United States of America, so there really is no survival strategy. Acceptance. That is about the best I can do, but I would only have about 20 minutes to worry about it, and that is if I instantly knew the exact moment that China launched. Then it is a 20-minute flight time. Then I am dead. Kids these days forget how nuclear war actually plays out. For all their faults, the baby boomers at least had a healthy respect for the prospect of full-scale nuclear war. Story 87. Hoard enough essential items I can. Then live as I do now. Reddit, sports, internet, Netflix, exercise, and so on. Story 88. I live in a primary target city, so I will probably just go outside, roll a joint, hug my family, and wait for vaporization. Story 89. I was thinking of immigrating to Mars with Elon Musk. Then I considered the alternative of dying slowly from radiation poisoning caused by the nuclear winter of World War III. I think it would be a similar experience. Story 90. Take a boat out and sail as far from Western civilization as you can. My logic is that perhaps the far-flung small island nations might not bear the brunt of it. Life would be dangerous to stay put. Story 91. Load up the car with all my camping gear, firearms, tools, solar panels, batteries, and vegetable seeds, and drive into Canada. If the border is blocked, find a forested place to cross. Get deep into the wilderness. Build a log cabin. Hunt for food. Make a garden. Split a bunch of firewood. Become a wilderness mountain man. Story 92. I live in the center of the United States, really close to a large population center. If there is a nuclear war, my survival strategy is non-existent. I guess I would hug my wife and dogs and watch the last few minutes of my life pass by. If it is a conventional war, I would probably plant a victory garden to have some fresh food. I would hoard some non-perishable and long shelf-life food since there would likely be supply problems. There are farms everywhere around here, but I am guessing most of that food would be shipped to the military, as it was in previous world wars. Other than that, I would mostly just go about my life as I always have. There is not much chance of a foreign military force reaching this far, or even bothering to take over my area. There are much more important places, both militarily and politically, that they would be focusing on instead. Story 93. Try to get a flight to New Zealand before it becomes difficult or impossible. The odds are good that nobody will bother interfering with New Zealand from a military or resource perspective, so just wait it out. Story 94. Assuming World War III is a full-scale nuclear exchange, then more than 90% of the world's population would not survive. The rest would be forced to live in conditions similar to the Stone Age, living nocturnal lives because the ozone layer would be depleted due to the nuclear war. It would not be pleasant. I am not sure I would want to survive. With any luck, you would be directly under a blast without seeing it coming, and that would be the end. Story 95. If it is tomorrow, I am still draft age, but I could not go to work for this current administration in the United States. I would rather go hide out in the desert and relax. Story 96. I work at Home Depot, and I am pretty sure I am going to be essential, so I will be at work while people stockpile all the toilet paper. Story 97. I and we are probably okay. There is a refinery at the top of the country that might be attacked, so say goodbye to many of my relatives. Otherwise, start pirating rich international luxury yachts, preferably ones that have sails or run on solar power. Story 98. Duck and cover. The Third World War will inevitably be fought with nuclear weapons. When you see the flash, duck and cover. If you hold your thumb up to the explosion and the explosion is bigger than your thumb, you are dead. If the explosion is entirely covered by your thumb, you might be okay. Heavy emphasis on might. Story 99. Head north to my parents' place, 2.5 hours outside the cities. 2.5 acres of fertile land with a vegetable garden. They are right on the edge of the forest and have deer, moose, wild turkey, and all sorts of other wildlife that wander across their yard all year round. Surrounded by innumerable lakes with tons of fishing and a creek that runs along the edge of the property with lots of trout in it. Go totally solar power and pool resources with their neighbors who have been family friends for years. Story 100. Generator, Pelton generator, grow lights, batteries, clean water. I hope nobody looks at my place to loot. I have enough rice and nutritional supplements to last until I get potatoes and other things growing. Story 101. My home is extremely close to a high-value coastal military base, so I am just hoping I do not get bombed in the opening salvo. Story 102. If you have not dug a really big hole by now, then put your head between your legs and say goodbye. Story 103. Not being American, European, Russian, or from any country that would likely be involved, the one time being Brazilian poses an advantage. We would probably remain neutral throughout the entire conflict. Story 104. Drive toward the likely places targeted by nuclear weapons. I would rather disappear in a flash than survive the fallout. Story 105. Grab interesting items and clothes, then run to the nearest bathroom to become an environmental storytelling skeleton. Story 106. If it is nuclear war, World War III, then I hope I am in the hypocenter. I will not even know what happened. The survivors will envy the dead. Story 107. People on the home front in World War II lived a fairly ordinary life. Head down and keep working. No real survival strategy was needed. Story 108. I'll stand on the front lines with my baseball glove, waving everyone off, yelling, "I got it! I got it!" Story 109. I am moving right next to the Canadian border for a quick escape, and my wife has dual citizenship. Playing all the sides. Story 110. Oh, finally I might find a good use for all the alcohol bottles that have piled up in my house over the years. Story 111. If it breaks out tomorrow, then tonight I am getting my 5 bug-out bags and informing my 4 neighbors who understand the message. I will fire up my 1971 Ford pickup, which does not have electronic ignition to prevent it from running if an electromagnetic pulse occurs nearby. Then I will head upcountry to my underground bunker. Everything I need is already set up there. Story 112. Try not to get injured, poisoned, irradiated, or killed. Try to protect my family from the same. Create a group to preserve knowledge of the past that will share it widely while outlawing the dangers of mechanized or nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare. Someone has got to try. Story 113. Determine the most likely winner and support that person. If for some reason I feel the odds have shifted to another's favor, then I will support that person. Just stay on the winning side every step of the way. Story 114. If my childhood sleepovers playing Red Alert over local area network have taught me anything, I will ensure my country property has an adequate power supply, pillboxes on all approaches, and guard dogs in the back for sneaky attacks. I'll harvest or for profit. I'll also find this character called Tanya and maybe a Tesla coil for the front driveway. For king and country. Story 115. Walk outside and catch the first nuclear explosion like a football to the chest. I do not want to survive long with my skin falling off and bleeding. Story 116. Obligatory, who wants to survive? Joke. Noting? If it is conventional, I will probably be left out of it. I am too old and physically infirm for combat or even support labor. I live in a pretty minor college city, population about doubles during the academic year, so the biggest threat to me personally is the possibility that a chemical plant about 40 miles away could be a target. It either will not be or I will not live long after it is hit anyway. If it is nuclear, we are cooked. Even a limited exchange would have environmental and economic ripples that make survival difficult. The same limitations that keep me out of the fighting make my own survival very unlikely in that case. An unrestrained nuclear exchange would almost certainly be an extinction-level event for thousands of species, Homo sapiens among them. Story 117. I'll be fine. I am too old for serious military service. I live in a country far away from likely conflict zones. I have enough land to grow food and friendly neighbors with more land to raise animals. Water is supplied from a bore about 15 kilometers away. The only downside is that there is an army ammunition dump about 10 kilometers up the valley. If they use a conventional bomb on it, I will be okay. Story 118. It depends. World War III has multiple forms. Nuclear. Stay with family as we plan on surviving just outside the nuclear area. Conventional. Do my daily work as I am past draft age. Story 119. I am going down to the pub for a few pints and some packets of salted peanuts. I will have my towel with me and hope I can get a ride out of here. Story 120. If I hear missiles are coming, I'm gonna run outside and try to headbutt one Vivian Basher style. Life's barely worth it while things are good. I am just waiting to starve to death. Story 121. I live in an area of no strategic importance. There are lots of farms, so if it goes nuclear, I will probably starve along with the other lucky ones during nuclear winter. If we somehow avoid an insurmountable global famine, I will probably do appliance repair, auto mechanic work, and if the opportunity presents itself, software development. I am not sure how many computers or devices will be functional. More or less, I will barter services such as preserving and repairing pre-war technology for food. Story 122. In Japan, buy a bow and arrow, learn to hunt wild boar, get fishing gear since I am close to the ocean, and start a garden. That way, I have the basics covered if worst comes to worst. Then continue living my life as normally as I can. Story 123. Pack what I can in a hurry and move to South Lake Tahoe. It is in California, but in an area that, according to nuclear fallout charts, should be relatively safe. Plus, it is the largest alpine lake in the United States. Story 124. Given that World War III will almost certainly involve nuclear weapons and that I can see my country's largest port facilities from my apartment window, I suppose I will die. Story 125. I live in a smaller city far from major population centers, and I am too old to be drafted. I will be fine. Story 126. Go to work. If it starts landing on United States soil, prepare for all the Asian hate as people who look like me start sending their sons, brothers, and fathers home in coffins. It will become for all. Story 127. Get my high school friends, jump in a truck, go to a sports shop, load up on chips and guns, and head for the mountains. Story 128. Survival? I am more interested in sliding into her direct messages with a bottle of champagne and an invitation to the rooftop to get it over with. Smash some bubbles and then disappear into the vapor. If I make it, I have my Glock and lots of dehydrated food. Story 129. Probably joining whatever remains of the military after the first exchange. I would rather be surrounded by organized men with supplies and weapons than fighting the rest of you over some half-crushed box of burritos somehow overlooked by looting mobs. Story 130. Go to Facebook Marketplace and buy lead-lined refrigerators. What, you don't think Indiana Jones is fictional, do you? Story 131. Stay away from the Northern Hemisphere. That is where conflicts often occur. Story 132. World War III is underway. It is fought primarily on a cyber front and involves extensive misinformation. Story 133. If it is nuclear, get close to a missile target and get vaporized. Who wants to live in the hellscape that would be left if there were an actual world war between nuclear powers? Story 134. I am going to stay in my small house in the rural area of the state where I live and wait it out. Story 135. It depends on whether I survive and how far I am from the blast. Maybe I get drafted. I'd be all right with that since I'm single. Otherwise, I would stay with my friends who have guns. I think the real problem is access to basic medication and clean water. Honestly, I would probably die. I'm good with technology and making things, so maybe I would be confined in a basement making items or like that old man checking the oil in the movie Waterworld. Story 136. Apparently, I would be sitting around eating a large amount of white rice because that is as far as my food preparation is gone. Story 137. Sitting on my porch with my cat, hopefully far from where a nuclear warhead might hit, so we can leave quickly. I do not want to be around for that. Story 138. It is already broken out. Look at the beginnings of the last World War. It is not like you are going to check the news one day and it says, World War III has begun. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.